Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.
Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. Here now is your host, Jennifer Miele, Chief Communications Officer and Managing Director of Evangelization of the Diocese of Greensburg.
Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Miele, Chief Communications Officer at the Diocese of Greensburg. Always happy to have special guests on this wonderful community program that airs each Sunday at 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. on WHJB in Greensburg. Today, we are talking about persistent post-concussive symptoms. This is very concerning, especially because so many people may be suffering from this who don't know about it. So I have two very special guests on the show today. First is Dr. Jim Masterson. He's Director of Sports Medicine and the Concussion Program at Excela Health. And today he's accompanied by Cheryl McCutheon. She has helped him and others to found a nonprofit to help individuals deal with these persistent post-concussive symptoms. It's called the Westmoreland County Concussion Awareness Group. Dr. Masterson, Cheryl, thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thank you for your opportunity, Jen. Appreciate it.
So I'm going to start with Dr. Masterson. I'd like to hear a little bit about you so our listeners at home can understand where you grew up, how you got interested in sports medicine, what your education was, and how you ended up being Director of Sports Medicine at Excela. So take us from the beginning.
Yeah, Jen. So I actually grew up in South Hills of Pittsburgh in Dormont. Went to Keystone Oaks High School and on to University of Pittsburgh for college. Ended up at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine and did an internship in residency at Doctors Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I did go on to get a certificate of added qualifications in sports medicine. And sports medicine is something that I always wanted to do. So I was fortunate enough to get that, and then fortunate enough to end up in Greensburg, where, again, we've really found a home and really love it here. So opportunity to work with Excela Health. I started out in primary care and then transitioned over to all sports medicine. About 20 years ago, a little bit more than that, developed an interest in concussion. And we started seeing a lot of athletes with concussive injuries. We're one of the first areas to use the impact test, the kind of computerized assessment of memory function after a concussive injury that you can compare to baselines and use as one tool to assess when it's safe for an athlete to go back on the field. So we began using that, and the program grew, and we added some additional tools. I really can't thank Excela Health and the Latrobe Charitable Foundation and Westmoreland Charitable Foundation enough for the tools that they've provided to help our program really grow and become a success. So we started seeing more and more athletes, and again, I very much enjoy that part of the practice for not only concussive injury but other sports injuries. But the concussion part really grew, and it started to really gain notoriety at the professional level and collegiate level, which helped promote it where I really believe it's most important. At the high school, middle school, and even lower levels. In the developing brain, where that injury on top of injury can be such a catastrophic event, and yet trying to balance that with keeping our kids active. I went into sports medicine because I love sports. I love seeing our kids active. So we didn't want to dampen that at all. Just wanted the kids to be safe and not suffer any short-term or long-term consequences. So we got more tools and developed a really complete program. We're fortunate to have some outstanding vestibular therapists, athletic trainers, physical therapists, and really a good full team. Started to see more work injuries, slip and fall injuries, motor vehicle accidents. And initially it was, well, gosh, is this really what I wanted to be doing or not? And then listening to the people, talk and in the office visit, seeing the hardships that they were going through, and the person in front of you looks absolutely fine. but we know that they have, cognitive issues that they didn't have before, and emotional issues that they didn't have, visual and vestibular issues that they did not have before. And that became a big part of the frustration with almost everybody I saw was, hey, they don't get it. People don't understand it. My family doesn't. The workplace doesn't. And of course, there's a lot of physicians out there who aren't as familiar with what can happen long term with a concussive injury. But we heard over and over and over again, that hey, this is, people don't understand. People are getting affidavits of recovery from physicians to go back to work when they clearly were not ready to get back to work. So that was a tough part of it. So we kind of figured that, well, hey, gosh, it would be nice, at least for these people who are struggling, to know that they're not alone. So that's kind of how the support group came to be. And one of the most, memorable nights for me and most touching nights for me was our first support group meeting, where we just, sat around with a group of people that I had already met in the office, and I knew a little bit of their story, but, we had an hour and a half, and I was all prepared. I thought, gosh, after the first 15 minutes, I'm going to have something prepared so we can talk and go. And an hour and a half went by, and we just barely made it around a room. And again, just hearing the stories in depth, it was so much more than what I had heard, just in the office visits that we had, and kind of realized that, my God, we got to help in any way we can help. This group of people really is misunderstood, and they're trying so hard to get by on a daily basis. Nobody can really see what they're going through. Did get the Facebook page going, and that was a good thing. We do have a lot of good information. We have some people that post some awesome information. And gosh, we had a one thing struck me just last week, where we had a mom get on and talk about her daughter and some of the struggles that they were going through. And there must have been, 15 responses in an hour of different people and how they could kind of help. So I thought that was awesome. And then in the summer of 2019, and I'm sorry, Jen, if I'm rambling too much, I can, okay. But in the summer of 2019, Cheryl, who, was a patient and was going through, a lot of these struggles, but had worked before in a place where she was, kind of coming up with some support and help for the people that she was working with at that time, came and said, hey, here's something that I had, where I was working before. And I think this could be put into a format to help the people with persistent post-concussive symptoms. And I looked at it, and it was a pamphlet, but in this one little pamphlet, it had so much information. So, said, geez, that really seems like a good tool. So talked about adding that in. And then as time went on, it was like, well, geez, don't you think there's even more that could be done, and things that could be brought into the community? And by the way, when I go to the national meetings, our community, with the vestibular therapists and we have some functional, neurologists, neurochiropractors, we're pretty well equipped, but there's still a lot more. There's a lot more in the way of raising awareness. There's more in bringing different tools into the area, things like Love Your Brain yoga. There's a lot of people who can't afford treatments that we just know would help them. So, potentially being able to help fund. And so from summer of 2019 until now, I mean, honestly, it's been primarily Cheryl who's done all the legal work, the footwork. And I didn't realize how much went into starting a nonprofit, but I certainly wouldn't have had the time, knowledge, or energy to be able to do it. But she's kind of brought it to completion recently. There's a couple final steps that need to be done, but we're at the point where we can actually do some fundraising this summer and really get things rolling.
Cheryl has helped you create this nonprofit called the Westmoreland County Concussion Awareness Group. Cheryl, I'm happy to have you on the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your connection and why you're so passionate about this?
First of all, thank you for having me today. My connection, I guess, is for the fact that I did go through a concussion, and I guess I'd gone through like the experience that so many go through in the workplace of, they look at you, you're fine. And, they're not understanding like what's going on with you. I don't know. And I guess I had joined in on the concussion support group meetings, and I saw there that so many were going through similar things that I have gone through. And it was, not good that they got hurt, but nice to see that someone else understands where I'm coming from, because I wasn't able to speak with it, at work and explain what's going on to me. And I don't know, it's very, very difficult. I don't know. And I want to help people. I've always helped people. I had a career for 28 years and I lost my career over this concussion. And I never planned on being where I'm at today, but I'm actually thankful that I am here today to help people in a different way. Mm-hmm. Thanks to Dr. Masterson for taking the time to listen to me. That's just unheard of, for someone and he didn't even really know me. And I just kind of presented my idea. One thing led to another, and here we are with you now. So,
Cheryl, that's wonderful to hear. How were you injured, and what were some of the symptoms that you have been experiencing?
I was actually working at the time, and I was rear-ended by a gentleman who was admitted to texting and driving. When he hit me, I didn't even know what happened. I was actually with a girl that I'd worked with, and she's the one who said, "Hey, who hit us?" And I didn't know, like even after she said it, it's like I just couldn't comprehend what was going on around me. And I remember crawling out of the car because I couldn't get out of my door. So I remember crawling into brush. And when I got out, it wasn't until I was out of the car that I even knew that I hit another car. And I don't know, it was just from there. Nothing was right. I was nauseated. I ended up with trouble reading. I couldn't comprehend things. I had vision problems, continuous headaches. I can't sleep. There was so much going on with me. And it's funny, I have to mention the workplace because right from the start, they didn't really want to help me out, and it's funny because I'd worked there for 28 years and I never really asked for help. But they as much as didn't want to fill out the accident report. The girl I worked with attempted to, but my assistant director told her she didn't need to. I was like, in what workplace would you not have to fill that out? I had just totaled my personal car and you're not going to fill out an accident report. So I went in the following Monday and filled it out. And that's when I really knew that I had problems because some of my officers had come to me and they wanted me to issue a warrant. And when I was listening to them tell me what was going on before I authorized it, I couldn't understand a word they'd said to me. And I remember going back to the field notes and reading them, and I couldn't even really read them. I had to actually take my finger along the computer because my eyes wouldn't track the words, and I couldn't understand what I was reading. So I knew that there was a pretty serious problem at that point. And I didn't know much about concussions, but I knew a little bit through my son playing sports. And that's when I made the appointment with Dr. Masterson. So anyway, at that point, I was diagnosed with concussion. They took me off work for 3 months. And then I was to return to work part-time with restrictions, of course. And then that's where I started falling back with my work. That happened really quick. I wasn't able to multitask anymore. I was able to do like 10 things at one time. I couldn't do it. It was hard to do just one. I started to try and take work home with me because I couldn't keep up. I couldn't even do it there because I was just sick all the time. So time went on. Of course, I still kept trying to do my job. I got to the point where I was just so tired of everything. I wanted to hide my injury from the doctors. I wanted to tell everyone it was fine, but I couldn't do it because I knew I wasn't right and I couldn't keep up with my job. I was embarrassed to ask for more help from people because that's difficult for me as a person to ask for help. Mm-hmm. But alone then, people got so tired of it and they started making fun of me, telling me I was milking the system and, I look fine. It was ridiculous comments that were coming to me. But of course, you're just like, whatever, it is what it is. But anyway, my struggle to stay current became almost impossible now at this point. Just so you understand the kind of worker I was the type when I would be all caught up. I would go around and take my officers' work off their desk and do it for them. And these people would say things to me like I'm milking it or, making something like this up. I couldn't have made something like this up. I don't know who could have dreamt that up.
We're just going to take a quick break here real quick. Thanks for listening to WHJB and Westmoreland Community Connections. We're talking about persistent post-concussion symptoms. We have two amazing guests on the line. Stay with us and we'll be right back.
This is Westmoreland Community Connections on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. If you have a suggestion for a topic, or if your nonprofit organization would like to be featured on this program, call us during regular business hours at 724-216-1200.
Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.
Welcome back to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Miele. We're talking about persistent post-concussive symptoms today, and we're with two of the founders of the Westmoreland County Concussion Awareness Group, Dr. Jim Masterson, Director of Sports Medicine and the Concussion Program at Excela Health, and one of his patients, Cheryl McCutheon. Cheryl suffered a concussion at work. She was in a car accident, a very high productivity worker who then became a totally different person. She was just detailing for us the symptoms of what she experienced after that concussion. And so many of us need to hear this because these may in fact be symptoms that some of us are suffering from and may not even know it after some kind of head injury. So Cheryl, you were saying that you were the kind of boss who would go around to the desks of your workers and you would pull work from their desks to try to help them. And now here you are after a concussion and you can barely handle your own workload. Tell us about that.
So anyway, again, like I was saying, it was almost impossible now after the concussion for me to keep up with my workload. And there was a lot of time sensitive information that was laying there that needed to get done. It's not like something that could wait. And again, my workplace, they did help, but they were just getting so tired of it. I guess their tolerance of my injury was just wearing thin with them, because they didn't really believe it. I looked perfectly fine to them. We're talking months later. I don't know. It was hard enough for me. It's hard for me to accept the fact that I can't work at that pace anymore. I still can't until this day. I still have a hard time on computers till this day, and who's going to believe that? This is now 4 years out, and it's, I'm telling you, it's very, very hard for me to accept. But I sit there and think, how do I expect other people to accept it when I almost can't myself? I do, but it's just difficult for me.
What an amazing story. And I'm sure, Jim, when you hear this from multiple patients, which is probably why you were driven with Cheryl's help to create the Westmoreland County Concussion Awareness Group. Story after story like this. And the goal of the support group is to, I would imagine, help individuals deal with the emotional suffering, but also let's talk about some of the therapies that someone like Cheryl has been through and what is out there that can be offered to at least relieve partially some of their symptoms.
Yeah, so it really is an evolving field. And you're absolutely right that it is story after story that I hear. And that's what's so compelling to, bring something to the area that can really help the people that are suffering with it. So there's a whole lot of different treatments. Number one goal is probably to raise that awareness so that people actually do realize that this person who's in front of them that looks completely normal really can be having issues from a concussive injury, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 4 years out from the injury. So additionally, early on, we have things like vestibular therapists, cognitive therapists, physical therapy, because so many people have, neck issues and such as well. We have a tremendous vision therapist in the area. They're not associated with Excela Health, but they do such a tremendous job with so many of our patients. Visual issues are one of the biggest things that we see. We could really use additional help in the emotional part of it, for sure. So often we do the impact test I'd mentioned before, but the impact test is developed to be a reliable, reproducible brief test of verbal memory, visual motor speed, and reaction time. And what we see in so many of our patients is that they have trouble with attention and concentration, or processing speed, or executive function, the frontal lobe stuff, the higher function part of the brain, the ability to take all the different input that you get and sort it out and put the stuff that you need to achieve your predetermined goal kind of in order. And boy, if we can get some additional cognitive tools in the area to help people with that, if we can get some additional emotional help in the area, one of the most important things, and one of the few things that is universally found to be beneficial for people suffering with persistent post-concussive symptoms, is meditation, mindfulness, bringing things like love your brain yoga, things to the area that people can afford, because in addition to all the emotional toll that this injury can have, it has a financial toll on people as well. So if there's somehow we could bring the stuff to the area and then also help people afford it. We have a lot of people we know that they could get better if they could just get the appropriate vision therapy, but there's no way that they can afford it. We have a lot of chiropractors who understand the injury in our area, and they can be a great benefit to the people that we see as well. So there's an awful lot of resources still that can be brought in. We'd love to go into the schools and do programs, and maybe even to some businesses and do programs to kind of explain the injury and understand how you can have symptoms that long afterwards. So every person who comes in with a concussion, I go through the kind of the mechanism of what happens at the neuron and axon level, and kind of the immediate things, and how there's that energy crisis going on in the brain as the brain tries to repair itself, and how dangerous injury on top of injury can be. But that stuff gets better in weeks to maybe a couple months. So why do people still have symptoms 4 years down the road? And that's the part that's hard to understand. But we know that you can have neuroinflammation for greater than 4 years afterwards. We know that I always tell people there's 100 billion working thinking cells in your brain, but there's 10 times as many cells that support those 100 billion working thinking cells. And they've seen activation of those cells for more than 4 years after. So there is a physiologic reason. But then the real world things that we see are the vision issues. 65% of our brain cells are involved in the visual system. The attention deficit that can be life-changing. What Cheryl said, the difficulty with multitasking. We see that over and over and over again. Give me one task and I'm fine. But, tell me to get these 10 things done, over a course of a day, or, and it's not going to happen. Or ask me to do a task when there's, noise on one side and bright lights on the other side, or to go shopping at Walmart or a grocery store where you're, walking past and the vestibular system is so activated. It can be very difficult. There's awareness is probably number one, and number two, there's a lot of resources that we could still bring in.
Cheryl, I'm so touched by, your high productivity prior to the concussion, and how you're really kind of mourning the loss of your ability to do those things. But obviously, you still have the drive and you still have the motivation to do that, because you've helped to found a new nonprofit in Westmoreland County, the Westmoreland County Concussion Awareness Group. Congratulations on all of your hard work. You have a Facebook page now. You're working to provide support for individuals who have been through similar things. What are your hopes? What are your goals with this?
My hope is that people who are concussed never feel alone, that they know that help is available. And a really big thing is to educate people and improve awareness in today.
It's so important that people know about injuries. And we see now coming to light more and more the sports injuries, the CTE awareness groups, things like that are out there, trying to promote brain safe sports to children. But we could be any age and suffer a concussion like this and really suffer the devastating effects of that. So Cheryl, when you get this nonprofit ramped up, you'll be doing fundraising. But right now, individuals can join that private Facebook group, which is the Westmoreland County Concussion Awareness Group. They can go on there, they can join that private Facebook page, and they can share their stories, right? And individuals can help each other with resources that are available.
Absolutely.
But the only thing, Jen, and I'm sorry, that it is actually, they would search for the Westmoreland County Concussion Support Group.
Okay.
To get on the Facebook.
The Westmoreland County Concussion Support Group is what they're going to search for. But I'm sure once they type in Westmoreland County and concussion, that's going to come up. And I think that's a very valuable resource for everyone. This has just been such an eye-opening interview between Dr. Jim Masterson, the Director of Sports Medicine and Concussion Awareness, Concussion Program at Excela Health, and one of his former patients, Cheryl McCutheon, who suffered a concussion almost 4 years ago and is still on the road to recovery. These individuals have been talking to us today about persistent post-concussion symptoms, and they are the founders of the Westmoreland County Concussion Support Group, which can be found on Facebook. But I urge you, if you or a loved one has suffered a concussion or some kind of head injury and is seeing some of these symptoms, Jim, they need to get in to see you right away, correct?
Well, I think there's help out there. Yeah, I would love to see them. So thank you.
And to make an appointment with you, they can research you at excelahealth.org. They can also call and make an appointment with you and your staff. Tell us about your offices, where you're located.
So our office is at 410 Palace Road, right in Greensburg. And again, we have a really good cast of therapists and I've really grown to enjoy working with people who have persistent post-concussive symptoms, not just our athletes, but of course, both parts of the spectrum of patients that we see. So, I'm happy to work where I work. The hospital system's been so good to me. We have a lot of tools, and I think we're well prepared to do as much help as we can for people suffering with persistent post-concussive symptoms.
The Westmoreland Concussion Support Group is now available on Facebook, a private group. They'll be doing fundraising and more events as I'm sure COVID-19 subsides, and we all hope that happens very soon. I want to thank you both for joining us today on Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings in and around Westmoreland County. Join us again next week on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB.
Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.